Like suddenly it's like, yeah, I agreed to do your payroll. And now you've been told, also, I'd like you to get all this paperwork filled out for the employee. Or, oh, you do my payroll. Can you handle the workers' comp? Or, hey, you said you do payroll. Can you track what job every single employee works on at any given moment? And that creep of scope is tough. And especially because I'm a bit of a people pleaser, I had real trouble just saying, no, you didn't pay for that.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fun one. Our returning guest is Rhamy Alejeal. Welcome back to the show. We have a fun one because I love having prior guests on the show. You already know what the score is, and I feel like we're going to tackle a whole bunch of new things and exciting things for our listener. So before we do that, for those who haven't listened to the episode that was almost 3 years ago, let's have you share what you're doing today and how you got to doing what you're doing.
You got it, Michael. Well, like all good young men at 13 at Halloween, I dressed up with a clipboard as a good HR rep. That's what I always wanted to be. No, I'm a consummate nerd. I got degrees in financial economics, labor economics. I focused on this idea of the analysis of why people work where they work. And I'd always been very entrepreneurial. Started out at 13 doing cold calling for my grandmother.
Do you remember that? It's an amazing story.
Yeah. So I just always have wanted to run my own company. And that place where I found my niche was in this world of labor economics, which over time became HR somehow. And the reason is because my company provides an HR department for other companies all across the United States. So we work in like a pod of 6 to 8 specialists, people who've spent years focusing on compensation analysis or being a compliance officer or being a payroll or time and labor manager. And I put those people together in a pod run by an HR generalist. And we provide an HR department with that depth of expertise, all the technology tools you need, all that stuff, so that even a 20 or 50 person company can have a scalable HR operation that removes people as a bottleneck inside their organization. That's our goal, right? To either mitigate risk or to increase your return on labor. That's everything we do. It all falls into one of those two buckets pretty much. And we work with those. And the number one way we grow is when CFOs, CPAs, and bookkeepers refer us in. So that's why I've always loved your podcast. I've listened to it for many years because in a lot of ways, the finance people are they're not necessarily our direct client, but they are the people who bring us into these businesses because they see the people as a major labor cost, as a problem that we can help solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's they're coming to you for the same reasons that you exist. You help make their life better because you help make their client's life better in many ways, either removing risk or reducing costs and the bottleneck, as you say. And, just thinking about people, having a whole team of experts that are working, what would it take for an individual company to ramp to that, right? It's just like, we're talking just significant costs and learning and curves and
a bunch of different consultants, and then no one actually does the work. And look, if I could figure out how to get, an HR guy to just be able to do all this stuff, my profit ratio would be much higher, right?
Yes, that's right.
But even in my level of expertise, I need someone who knows workers' comp and safety risk in New York and 5 or 6 other states. And that's a hire for me because, I can hire some SHRM generalist, but they're not going to have the depth necessary for me to tell my clients that we can take care of that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's a big win for companies that are working with you, because all of a sudden now, it's just covered, right? It's handled, sound well, and it's your problem now
That's right.
to
Yeah,
deal
and
with that, and they can focus on other core competencies.
that's right. And I mean, that's my kind of argument. And we kind of have two broad packages. One for anybody who has fewer than 200 employees. Over 200 employees, we can piecemeal some stuff out. We'll just handle this one piece. But for the vast majority of companies we work with under 200, I always get that question at sales. Well, like, I don't know that I need anybody to deal with long-term leave of absence management. We don't have anybody who goes on maternity very often, so we don't really need that. Can you cut that out of your program? And it's like, no, because it will happen, and it is a
Yeah.
problem, and it's something we have to develop for. And so really optimizing for this, like, we can just take responsibility for the entire people operations section of the business, allows me not to have to say no. That was my biggest issue for the first 5 or 6 years of my business. I would sell individual pieces, and then we just hit our 15-year anniversary, but those first 5 or 6 years when you're figuring stuff out, I'd sell, oh yeah, well, we'll do a comp analysis, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. But then clients would, of course, and I'm sure you guys have this as bookkeepers, they'd push the scope, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like suddenly it's like, yeah, I agreed to do your payroll. And now you've been told, also, I'd like you to get all this paperwork filled out for the employee. Or, oh, you do my payroll. Can you handle the workers' comp? Or, hey, can you said you do payroll. Can you track what job every single employee works on at any given moment? And that creep of scope, it's tough. And especially because I'm a bit of a people pleaser, I had real trouble just saying, no, you didn't pay for that. So it was about 7 years ago, we sat down and said, all right, let's just offer complete HR, a grown-up HR department scaling with you. And that's been really good for our clients.
I bet. Good for you as well. I'm sure those were tough times, having to say no to people, and the confusion, and it happens everywhere in all industries. If you don't have that clarity, it's easy to creep.
Yeah. Well, and I was terrible at it. So I distinctly remember a client paying me $86 a month for their 10 employees, $86 a month.
Wow.
And, and I wound up, I remember one of my staff wound up getting asked a question. They wound up doing this major project for them, setting up all this paid family leave stuff. I mean, and we wound up looking at the end of the year, and I was like, well, we spent 125 labor hours.
Wow.
In a year on this client that paid an $86 a month sub. And I thought, I screwed this isn't going to work.
Change that.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that was my wake-up call. That was a long time ago, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's always nice to hear those growing journey pains, call them mistakes, call them learning opportunities, whatever the case. There's not one entrepreneur out there that has not have like a big bucket of those, and the ones that they won't even share, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're all there.
Sweet ones. Yeah, these are, I learned
we
from
can share that one, but not the other ones. Okay. Because we're not all perfect. And as much as, sometimes we think others are perfect, that's the saying, right? We value other people's qualifications, undervalue our own. But at the end of the day, you're probably way better than you think you are. And yeah, everybody makes mistakes. So that's why I love hearing them. I know our listeners, it's one of the key things they love on this podcast is hearing those mistakes, because it kind of lets the steam off a little bit of, oh, right, I made a mistake. Okay, address it and move on. And so very cool to hear.
The journey of entrepreneurship is hopefully running face first into many brick walls. I mean, you make when I used to have a lot, I still have a podcast. It's very compliance and news focused. It's just me on there now. But back in the day, I used to do guests a lot. And when I'd ask somebody, tell me about your greatest business failure, and if they couldn't give me a good one, I was like, oh, you're not ready.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not ready.
You have some big ones coming.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're coming. Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get that
Don't
credit
worry.
card.
This seems easy. It's not. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's actually part of your business, working with people, entrepreneurs, Obviously, this is how you get connected very, very many times through CFAs, CPAs, CAs, and bookkeepers. But yeah, you're dealing with the people as they're making the mistakes, and most likely with an HR people problem that they're coming along. And it's a good segue into perhaps how this relates back to bookkeepers and the
That's
work that
right.
they're doing. I'd love to hear that story, and also maybe start with was that something that was just automatically like, oh, this is where we get our clients from, and this works really well, or how did you discover that?
That's a great question. Well, there's two pieces to that. Well, I'll tell you how kind of this happened. At first, I used to be a direct guy. I mean, I started my company at 22 with my wife, and because I knew sales, I walked in cold to about 7,000 businesses over the course of 3 years, dropping off
Wow.
my business card and asking for one of theirs. And every Monday and Friday, I would call a bunch of them. And I
Wow.
mean, I'm based in Memphis. I have been in every gravel parking lot, all the way down to Atlanta and north up to St. Louis. I would drive 3 hours and go find a small town, and I'd be like, today I'm going to go in every one of these companies. That's how I built my company. It is not the most efficient way of doing it.
It's remarkable. It's a
It's
remarkable way.
remarkably inefficient, but it worked, and it got me started. My dad worked at the post office. There's no entrepreneurship in my family. I didn't have any business connections. I didn't go to church, and I don't play golf. So I didn't realize there was a whole other way of generating business. I thought you just had to have a great product and sell it at the lowest cost you can and get in there, and I learned a lot since then.
Yeah.
People are what matter. And so what I found is as we grew and had a nice base of business, often we would go into these companies, and the most common issue that I wish every client was a venture capital funded 5-person shop that knows they're going to scale to 100 employees in the next 6 months, right? And they want to put in place all the processes to scale up. And that's why they came to us.
Right.
That happens about once a year. Everybody else is, hey, my client totally is in a lot of trouble, and they totally screwed this thing up. And it turns out the person they had in charge of it isn't doing it, and they realize they need help. It's almost always a crisis or a problem that's brought to our attention. And that's why the CFO, CEO, or even their CPA or something, what happens with you as a financial professional, you're one of their trusted advisors. And so a client calls you up and says, maybe they're a nonprofit, and they're like, we got our first big grant that's going to pay for this kind of stuff, but we need to track every hour worked under this grant, right? And it's something that has to be figured out that way. Or maybe you're the CFO and you realize in a construction company that you broadly know what projects people are working on, and you're kind of trying to trace that back to the proposal, and did that make you money or not? But you're not to the extent of knowing what part of each project is screwing you up, right? So we had a client that was brought to us 6 months ago, and it's because they were a 25, 30-person construction company, and they were tracking where their guys were working on, what projects. They built houses, but they didn't know if they were doing welding, framing, carpentry, whatever. And these are blue-collar guys. They're not going to really keep a good work log that then has to be translated. So for them, their primary issue was a labor costing project, right? So what we were able to do is convert this to a mobile app where we're tracking what job they're working on and what project they're working on at all times. It's very easy for them to do right on their phones. Train the foreman on how to track that, put in place the controls to get it accurate by the end of the week, and bring that in. And they happened to also be a prevailing wage organization. So again, it was a problem where this was the first government contract they had. So we had to track all those things and pay out appropriately for that. So now fixing those issues was the reason they came to us, or they were looking. They went to their CFO, or I think it was actually their CPA in that case, saying, I don't know what to do here. But then once we addressed those issues, then we started looking at how are they recruiting? How are they training? Are they paying appropriately? Compensation and benefits, and moving them through all those cycles so that they can scale up if they'd like on the people side. So it's always some problem. That's always the first thing we got to deal with. And then after that, we're getting in there. I had another common referral source for us is business attorneys. But people who are preparing, they're thinking, oh, like in a year or two, I want to sell my company, right?
Right.
So they're coming up, they talk to their CPA and they're like, look, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about exiting. What do I need to do? And the CPA knows that half of their workers are misclassified as independent contractors, or that they are paying a benefit stipend, $500 a month cash, no taxes, straight to these employees to cover their benefits, which is wrong and illegal, but they know they have to fix these things prior to being ready to go to market, because no acquirer is going to take on that risk of a very silly issue. So there's just a lot of reasons, but what I find is the bookkeepers are the ones, and the CPAs and the CFOs, they're in there in the finances. And so whether it's they need labor costing, whether they see a compliance issue, whether the client has come to them with something like, we've got all the business we need, but we can't recruit, or we've got all the business we need, but our people keep quitting. Are they overworked? I can't find a good manager to take care of them. There's almost always some people problem, and that's something that gets brought to our attention.
Wow. So that I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Before the show, we'd been talking about the overlap, and also I think what was interesting, and I hear it very often, is that, there's a bookkeeper. Traditionally, the bookkeeper is working with the finances of the business, but they get pulled into these other parts. Like you can imagine, a bookkeeper could easily get pulled into trying to fulfill on some of these requirements that you just talked about, right? Okay, we got a government grant. There's a whole bunch of paperwork. You're good at paperwork. Can you do this? Can you do that? I'm sure this is not news to you. I've heard it. I'd love to talk about that and how, the benefit of it, the cons of it, the challenges, the risks, right? You would imagine all the things that you've just laid out for us. Sounds like a lot of like compliance risk. Like if you do this wrong, huge consequences.
It is, and it's also not in your, as you try to scale your business as bookkeepers, you have to decide whether you want to expand your product offering or service offering to cover things that are maybe not as tightly tied to your core offering, right? Your job is there's a lot of things that fall into your job, whether that's AP and AR and financial reporting and management reporting and categorization and all kinds of stuff that falls into it. But when you're brought into things that are outside of your scope, kind of depends. If you're a small-time, just started up kind of bookkeeper and you're like, well, if he's going to ask me the question and I can charge for it, let's figure it out. Nothing wrong with that decision. There may be some risk involved in that decision, but there's a risk in every business, right? What I find is that when you really start figuring out what you do and your niche, and you're trying to scale that yourself, you can't just throw a project like that on your employee, right? And expect them to do a good job. That's not in their world. You as the business owner are like, I'll figure it out. And you're probably right. You probably do just fine. None of this is rocket science. It's just time consuming and and there is a depth of knowledge to be figured out in the best way of doing it, the least resistance way, the most efficient way. But you can all figure it out. It's just a matter of whether you want to keep it internal. So we offer a partnership program that we give to our financial professionals who refer us. They get a slice of the pie of whatever they refer to us. And basically we try to make it so that slice is good enough that if they decided to take on the project themselves and charge some hourly rate and, have to pay other people to do it and hire some outsourcers and all this kind of stuff, maybe their margin would have been 20% on that project. Well, we're going to give them 5-6% of what we charge with no real work, and you can separate it out. So it's a good way to answer those questions from a purely Machiavellian, maximize your own revenue standpoint without accepting the risk and not having to develop a new business line. Because there's a lot of things you can do with one guy figuring stuff out that you really can't do at scale. And if you're a successful bookkeeper trying to figure out how to grow your organization, if you keep getting dragged off into these side projects, these side quests, that you're only going to do this once a year or once every 3 years, you're not developing the expertise and the skill in your business that you need to be figuring out. So this is a good way to throw those out onto someone else.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many layers to that because you'd imagine everything you've said, like if it's not their expertise, I mean, how do you price it? How do you, what's the value of the work that you're doing? That's your business. You figured all that out. So even if they did do the work and the work was exactly the same work, you'd probably, I'm going to guess you charge a lot more for it. And rightly so, because you understand the value and you've been working on that for 15 years or so in your business. Just like they have to maximize and figure out their own business and charge accordingly. So it's like the whole concept of staying in your lane. But like you say, when you're getting started, you're not sure really what you may end up going and working in a business like what you're doing.
Right.
Like
if you're a
can
one-man
happen,
shop and you've got 30 hours a week that you're just kind of wondering what to do, I've been there, right?
Yeah.
Like I just said, I knocked on doors 20 hours a week. Okay. I've been there. If someone said, well, hey, would you do my bookkeeping? I'd be like, well, shit, I guess I'll figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah,
I needed some money. But
you're trying to figure out your lane.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago. I never wound up doing the bookkeeping. I don't think I'm suited for it. But yeah, it's but as you really figure out your niche, if you're the bookkeeper and you've or the CFO or the fractional whatever, the FP&A guy, whatever it is you're doing, the value of your time working on improving your business far exceeds the value of your time doing work on a project that's not really scalable or repeatable for you. And I had to understand that too. That's why I don't run an accounting company, even though a lot of the crap we get pulled into sometimes is an accountant's fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't, the number of tax notices I get about franchise and excise tax, just like, dude, that's not me. I don't deal with that. I handle your labor, your payroll taxes. I don't do this side of stuff. So we see that there's an opportunity for these businesses. That's one reason we also are a good partner, because we keep track of the people who work with us, and we find that there's always a good opportunity to refer back.
That's right. Absolutely.
As you know, it's an industry where there's a relatively low barrier to entry, and the good people are amazing and worth their weight in gold, and even a average or mediocre person is worth their weight in gold to the IRS. Right? It's a bad time.
Yeah,
The
that's
penalty
right.
is so high. So
Yeah.
we're always on the lookout for great partners.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So do you have recommendations then? What is the pathway that people would have? It's like this is an issue that's coming up for them, or they're seeing this, they're being offered maybe a task that's not in their wheelhouse. What's the steps that they take? How do these partners end up becoming partners where they say, yeah, that's a good idea to call you and get you involved?
Yeah. Well, my advice to business owners, and I actually think this applies to every field of every business, is that your discovery should be broad enough to determine if there are needs or problems, even if those problems are not necessarily ones that you solve, but may affect you. So one thing we train our partners on, like when they work with me, I walk them through it, is part of your discovery. You have a discovery process, or you have a implementation process, or something like that when you're bringing on a new client. I think adding 5 or 10 questions in there that are simple on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident do you feel that your benefits are being administered correctly? That you're paying your overtime correctly based on your various sites? Some things like that. And we have a HR audit that's, I think, 10 questions, and you could grab a couple from there. And what the partners who refer to us a lot is they've just incorporated that into their methodology, right? So when they're bringing on new clients, they're asking about these problems. If there are problems, they say, hey, we got a guy to fix that. And they're immediately providing more value to their client at almost no effort. They're uncovering a problem, providing a solution, moving on with their main thing. And they do that not just for like me and HR. Most of the very successful, or many of the most successful businesses I know, they always want to discover or implement broad enough that there's that opportunity to cross-sell or refer. So that would be my like broad business advice. If you're installing, I don't know, if your client is a person who does insulation, right? They should ask questions about siding and roofing and windows.
Yeah, makes
Right?
sense. You're in
Very
front of
easy.
the decision maker. If you get referrals or can refer, you should be looking at, it's like someone coming in and say, hey, I'm going to renovate my garage. It's like, how are your bathrooms? It's a kitchen, someone's
Get the-
renovating, you ask those questions. And that's, I think, part of being in the lane. Some people stay in the lane even from just a mental perspective. It's like, if you think of it, just open up and look at, like, this is a business owner, what's going on for them? If you have a little insight, it's going to help you convert more likely, because most people are not asking those questions.
Exactly.
They're like, how many bank accounts do you have? Really technical stuff that they don't really understand the value of anyways. But whereas if you open up, like you've said, to understanding a bigger scope of what's going on in the business, what's happening in these different areas, now you can refer and be a great partner for many other situations.
Right.
And
the client.
And help them get to
cares.
success faster, right?
Yeah. This amazing gal bookkeeper is paying attention to my business and is someone I can go to and trust with problems. And who knows what they're going to come to you with, but that's the kind of, you want your discovery to be broad, because you want to identify problems, things that you have the connections or expertise to solve. The other thing would be simply, if you're specifically working in a group and you're seeing issues with the broad world of labor, whether that's compliance problems, payroll problems, costing problems, it's probably better for an HR company to handle that than yours. A lot of bookkeepers get sucked into, especially labor costing. That's probably the most common thing that they see, whether that's funding source, which is like grant funding for nonprofits, city budgets. We work with some larger clients like a city, and it's like, look, we need the police department, the fire department, the school teachers, the administration, the mayor's office. Those all have to be tracked differently, pulled from different bank accounts, GL'd separately. It's almost like a multi-entity group under one tax ID. You start getting to where labor is your biggest, time sink of tracker as a bookkeeper. It's time to bring in experts in that, because we spend more on our labor tracking software probably than you all do on the entirety of your software solutions, because it's something that we have to be so detailed with.
Yeah,
we have GPS enabled tracking for job sites. We have multi-EIN tracking, like a hospital network, where depending on what hospital they're clocking in and out at, we're getting different EINs billed through their W-2s, so they're separate entities, but from the employee experience, it's just one place they're clocking in and out, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of stuff going on.
That's very interesting, and a great pathway. I think I think number one, you've got a lot of expertise in selling. That's where you got your start in business. And already we've learned some cool things or been reminded of some cool things that make a massive difference in terms of selling. And then you have an opportunity to partner with a company like yours, delivering great services without the risk, without, getting out of your lane and focusing on the bookkeeping. Because, many of them, that's why they're doing what they do, is because they love the bookkeeping, love the work that they do.
They want to be able to scale that up. And part of that means being able to provide a lot of value that you don't have to spend much time on. And I want to help you with that.
Yeah.
I also find the actual, thinking again about labor costing specifically, a lot of the people work with us because we make them look very good, right? We can make it so that, if you think about your payroll sweep, it's a net payment, a taxes sweep, just 2 items in there. And then you're having to do a ledger breakout. We're going to handle all of that directly, so that you're just hitting the match button and then it's broken out. And we have general ledger files, journal entries on single payrolls that are 1,200 rows, because they want to know each department's expenses. They want to know each department's expenses by employer tax, by benefits, by 401k match, overtime versus regular wages. And we can handle all of that, pushes right into QuickBooks or Xero or whatever it is you're using. And now your financial models are significantly more accurate for projections, for budgeting, those sorts of items. So I think
Very exciting.
It makes you guys look real good too.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, the more accuracy leads to them being able to do a better job and provide more insight into the financial situation for their company. So I think it's an exciting opportunity for the industry, and especially with the rate of change I imagine you deal with, not only in the software but also the laws, the regulations, all of that stuff. There's a lot to keep up with.
Kill me. I mean, February, the DOL passed a primary rule that says, look, in July, the minimum salary for FLSA exemption is going up from 36 to 43,000, and it'll be 58 in January. And the one in July went into effect. And it was just 2 weeks ago, right after the election, a judge put an injunction in, and then the government withdrew their request. So literally all this year, like, the law changed between February and July, what the minimum salary was for all employees across the United States. No one was salaried less than $43,000. If you had somebody salaried at 40 grand between July and 2 weeks ago, you were breaking the law. Got to pay them overtime. And then that all got changed right after the election.
Wow.
And now it's back down to the original 36, and the big jump in 58 that a lot of corporations had been preparing for got rolled back. So this stuff changes a lot, and that's at the federal level. Every state is different too. So it's a lot more reading court cases than I ever thought I'd be doing.
Yeah, I bet. And you mentioned your podcast, more news. Tell us a little bit about that, and if we did have listener that were interested. Yeah.
Well, People Processes is the name of my company. So as in people and processes, right? People Processes. We're on YouTube. Some episodes get 20, 30,000 listens, and some episodes get 300. Just depends on the episode.
On the topic, you got it. Yeah, that's YouTube.
We just did one on an in-depth deep dive into Rule 4980H, which is about how you classify variable hour employees for the Affordable Care Act. So it's all about how quickly you have to offer people benefits when you're a larger business. A deep dive. The one before that was a much broader one about the Profit First program. We interviewed Ron, the president of the Profit First program, and kind of how that system interacts with business owners today. So it's very wide ranging, but it's always something that I think business owners who are scaling, who are looking to grow, that it would be very good for them, and for CPAs and bookkeepers who want to keep their finger on the pulse of this HR compliance stuff. It's a great one. You can also find us, and what I would love for your people to do is go to peopleprocesses.com/partner program, PARTNER program. And that's where they can read about our partner program, learn about the revenue share. We have like some really cool promotions right now. $5,000 on your first 5 when you get to 5 businesses with us, $1,500 on your first one just for fun. Like we do promotions depending on what we have available. But it's also, if you sign up on that, you also get access to we have about 20 compliance tools, that audit we talked about, but also things that you can use to reference very easily. And of course, you can always grab time with me. Anyone in our partner program gets 30 minutes a year with me to discuss anything they'd like. They have a client issue, those sorts of items. We can always dive in, do a written consult, stuff like that for them.
Lovely. Sounds like a great opportunity. Very, very much for our listener. And I would imagine predominantly for the United States is where
that's right.
That's
yeah,
your
I only
wheelhouse.
work in the U.S. We do have some clients that utilize us. We have one client in California with about 20 employees who has about 200 contractors internationally, where we're working with, they have people in the Philippines or India, and they want us to work on the operations of that. So it's the same things in terms of onboarding, performance management, that kind of thing. But we do have to exclude compliance in those groups, right?
Right.
So we have a main rate for the U.S. and a supplemental rate for the international contractors if they want the operation side of things. But I just can't deal with compliance in every country.
No,
it's
you
just
can't.
not.
That'd be a different program.
I can barely cover every state. They're already driving me crazy.
Absolutely. You got a few of them. So I'm sure that keeps you busy. This has been fantastic. Lots of great opportunities. I see a perfect fit for our listener. What a great resource and opportunity for them in their businesses. So I want to thank you for sharing it with us. And again, it's always a pleasure to hear your story. And, I love the knocking on doors right up to growing your own business to the level that you have. It's remarkable.
15 years in October. So just a little over 15 years we've been doing this. I'm in this business because I love entrepreneurs. Your listeners who are hanging out their own shingle, figuring stuff out, whether they've got 50 employees or it's them and their wife and their mom, which is who started my business, right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure this stuff out. I want to be a part of that journey. That's what I do, is talk with business owners about their stuff and try to help, because that's truly what I've wanted to do my whole life.
Beautiful.
Thank you all. peopleprocesses.com/partner program to find out more.
Beautiful. And we will have those links as well in the show notes. And so, on behalf of our listener, I want to thank you for being on the show, and it's great to have you back.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.